All right, we'll give it another minute, but while we wait, I just wanted to point out today's a good day for this presentation as well. The Journal Star had a wonderful editorial about the positive signs for downtown Lincoln. The latest development that was pointed out is the new Golds Building development by one of our South Point developers, actually, Jeff McMahon, and bringing in what might be our second largest apartment complex unit here in downtown proper with 183 units. So they ended the editorial by saying this new plan is ambitious and its economic demographic impact would be a shot in the arm for other downtown development, which remains the heart of Lincoln and a bellwether for our community. So good positive momentum bringing us in today for this presentation. And with that said, we're 2 minutes out. So in interest of time, I will get us started. Let me double check, make sure I'm not on mute. So I would like to introduce, for those of you who don't know me, I am Todd Ogden. I'm president of Downtown Lincoln Association and have been involved with the organization for nearly 15 years now. This is a good kind of bringing the gang back together. I see a lot of people that were involved with the 2018 Downtown Master Plan, including our former infamous DLA president, Terry Ulen. So glad to have him on this call. And a lot of you that were involved with the project committee for the master plan and a couple of the consultants. First and foremost, Brad Segal, who's going to be doing the presentation. Brad is the founder and current president of P.U.M.A, Progressive Urban Management Associates, and he has more than 30 years of downtown experience, certainly from both ends as consultant and working with bids in Denver, for example. And Brad has a long history with Lincoln. He's almost has 30 years of experience working with Lincoln alone. I believe his first venture with us was in 1999 to work on our business improvement district plan. And he did also help us with a couple of renewals and expansions along the way. And then most recently, P.U.M.A was the lead consultant in our latest master plan, which will be a good subject for today. In that group as well, I believe J.J. Folsom, Vice President of P.U.M.A, is also on this call. So thanks for joining us as well, J.J. And with that, I'll just send it off to Brad and we'll get going on the presentation. So thanks for joining us today and educating us on all these global urban trends, Brad.
Great, thanks, Todd, and good morning, Lincoln. And what a pleasure to see so many familiar faces on the screen. So great to see you all, and particularly under the circumstances we've all been enduring over the last 11 months or so. Today, I am going to update you on our global trends presentation and our best sense of how the pandemic has been affecting these trends, and then also bring it back to the plan, to the downtown plan. Should we be doing anything differently, I think is probably the big question based upon the disruption from the pandemic. And for those of you that were involved in the plan, may recall these global trends analysis was foundational to the plan. It's something that we do at P.U.M.A. So I've got about a 15-minute presentation or so on this, and then we'll have plenty of time for interaction and questions. So I'm going to put the presentation on the screen.
And while you get that on there, Brad, I want to mention, so feel free to type in any questions in the chat that you have ahead of time, and that'll prompt me to ask you and to ask Brad the question once he's done with his presentation. So as something pops up, feel free to use that chat.
All right, so thank you, Todd. So do we have the presentation on the screen? I think that is affirmative. So we've all become so eloquently familiar with Zoom over the last 11 months. So the Global Trends Report, it's something that we've used for almost 15 years. We initially created it back in 2007 to inform a downtown planning exercise in Denver, which is where we're based. And the approach, we're real estate economists as well as planners. So our role with our plan in Denver was to look ahead 20 years and try to get a sense of how downtown would evolve. And to do that, we looked at different trends that were shaping cities all over the country, all over the world, and then brought that back. So we obtain the best information on demographics, lifestyles, competitive trends. And it not only informed the plan in Denver, but we found this resonated wherever we worked. So this is a body of work. I think we first presented it to Lincoln probably about, I think, 8 or 9 years ago. Terry had me come out. I think it was an annual meeting where we presented it for the first time. And then more importantly, again, it was foundational in the 2018 plan. We did a big presentation, I think at the Rococo, where we had a couple hundred people, and the plans were foundational to all of that. The trends were foundational. This trends report has changed over time, and what this slide shows, it just shows that the trends we started with back in '07 are not necessarily the trends that we're still tracking. So about half of the trends are the same, about half are different. And then the 2020 report was prepared in the fourth quarter of 2019. And we were very excited to present what we thought would happen in 2020 moving forward. Never once having the word pandemic in the 12-page report of our plan. So the conclusion of global trends, and during that time period, and we saw these trends in Lincoln and Todd. Actually, I go back to '96 with Lincoln in terms of getting started with you guys. So it's been a pleasure watching the evolution of downtown Lincoln. But Lincoln, like other cities, for the last at least 15 plus years, all these different trends have been converging to be favorable for downtowns, and we've all been benefiting them from one way or the other. So bam, go back to March, and then we all got to know this little guy. So the question with the pandemic, is it totally turning our world upside down, or is something other than that going on here? And we agree with others, and I'm sure you've heard this in a lot of places. We really see the pandemic as more of an accelerator than something that's turning the world upside down. Certainly it's turning our world upside down for a year. But long term, it's accelerating trends that were in place before. And what we're looking at then is, how do we accommodate these accelerated trends moving forward? And of course, COVID wasn't the only significant disruption in our world. Last summer, the protests for racial justice, we see this as an acceleration of a trend that was already in place. So a trend to address social equity that was really being driven by both income inequality and racial injustices in this country. And there are several impacts from those protests that we think will be long-term that I'll briefly address in the presentation. And then lastly, of course, the economic shock and the worst unemployment that we've seen since the Great Depression. And I think the big question on people's minds for months and currently is, how long is this going to go on? Are we going to have a relatively brisk recovery, or is this something that's going to take years and years and years to recover from? And our sense is that the recovery is going to come fairly quickly. So we're maybe a little more optimistic than most. And we think in particular that downtowns are going to rebound relatively quickly as well. So I'm going to make that case with the remaining time as we look back at our trends and look at the impacts of the pandemic in accelerating many of these trends. So if you recall, our trends report has 3 big sections. The first one is demographics. And we're making a big bet here on demographics that younger generations are going to return to their pre-pandemic preferences more quickly than older generations. So they're experiencing less personal health risk. You've seen evidence of this over the summer. Unfortunately, when the virus increased, that was driven largely by younger generations. But we think that once the health conditions stabilize, you're going to see younger generations, millennials and Gen Z now, which is becoming a more important force, particularly in downtown markets. They're going to drive demand, a surge in demand for entertainment, dining, services, these niches that have just been hammered by the pandemic. We do see them coming back relatively quickly. Also important to note, the racial justice protests really are solidifying the activism role of these younger generations. On-the-job training, if you will, for millennials and Gen Z, and we see that having longstanding impacts as well. Other demographics, older generations are going to be a little more cautious. On the slide, that those are our boomers. I'm a boomer. We're all expecting to be back on that beach, you know, sooner than later. But we are going to be a little bit more reluctant to jump back, in part just, again, because of health risks to us and in some cases, elderly parents. Gen X, that age group from 40 to 55, we do think this will accelerate Gen X's ascension into positions of influence in communities all over the country. This was already happening, but boomers are getting a little taste of what retirement feels like now, and we think that that may accelerate boomers moving on and Gen X again taking reins of leadership in cities and organizations like DLA. Lifestyles. So I'll talk about different lifestyle trends we've been tracking. Retail, obviously, critically important to downtown Lincoln. It's always something we've been looking at. We've been working with you guys for about 15 years looking at retail in downtown. The pandemic to us accelerated retail trends that were already in motion. So what you've seen is outdated retail formats, tired brands, outdated suburban shopping malls. This has accelerated their demise. But by no means is this the end of bricks and mortar. And in fact, there might actually be a stronger connection for bricks and mortar. Yes, online sales have increased. They were about 10% pre-pandemic online sales. They're now maybe 16, 17%, which seems odd since everything gets delivered, but still, people are doing a lot of pickup. They're also still going back into stores. So bricks and mortar, we feel, will continue. It remains an opportunity for downtowns. And while many downtown retailers and restaurants in particular have been challenged and have suffered, many have gone out of business, we do anticipate a surge in entrepreneurship that can be channeled to downtown storefronts. So this is common in after most recessions, there's a surge of entrepreneurship. We think this one will even be stronger because of the nature of businesses that have been particularly hurt by the pandemic. So we view this as an opportunity for downtowns and certainly in downtown Lincoln to focus on storefronts and the storefront economy moving forward. Office is a big question mark. We've all been working on Zoom and many of us working from home now for 11 months. Big question mark, how many of us are going to go back to the office? We agree with most national experts on this that we're probably looking at return to some sort of hybrid situation. 5 days a week, 9 to 5 are probably going to be more rare. But the hybrid situation will anticipate probably 3-4 days in the office, 1 or 2 days that are not, more flexibility. Flexibility was a trend that was already in place prior to the pandemic, so this has certainly been accelerated. But we do think conventional office formats will remain and are essential. If you've got a company or an organization that requires creativity or teamwork, or if you're a younger individual, if you're entry level, mid-level, and you want to advance in an organization, we don't see how you can necessarily do all of that on a screen. So we do think office may be more sluggish than other sectors coming out of the pandemic, but by no means is this the demise for downtown office moving forward. Housing was identified as the top market opportunity in the 2018 plan, and Todd started the meeting today with the news about the Golds building, which is fantastic, and we still see that demand, particularly in Lincoln, for market rate housing continuing. We see the demand pipeline being replenished from younger generations, Gen Z and millennials, again, wanting to live in urban areas. Also boomers that are wanting to downsize and simplify. Those same market segments we think are going to come back. There is a caveat on this, and particularly during recovery, during the next 18 months, we do think affordability is going to be critical, particularly for the younger segments. So while Gen Z and millennials want to be downtown, they've been also most hammered by job losses in some of these service, restaurant, creative industries. So over the next 18 months, it'll be critical that downtown property owners, landlords, probably will need to consider concessions and look at some sort of way to ease this market back into downtown. But long-term prospects are positive, and again, affordability being critical. We still see the advantage of smaller cities, and if you recall, the 2018 plan talked about Lincoln as an opportunity city. That was the theme of the whole plan. And this was a trend that was in place prior, that younger markets were moving out of expensive coastal cities, and even cities like Denver that have become very expensive, and the quality of life is degraded in some of these larger cities, and we're moving to second-tier cities. We see that continuing and perhaps accelerating in the short term. So another opportunity for the opportunity city, for Lincoln, to really capitalize on that moving forward. Power of place. This is a new trend we talked about in our 2020 report about how cities were taking advantage of public space and using them differently. And wow, the pandemic really accelerated experimentation with public space. So in Lincoln, if you've had some successful experiments in using sidewalks more, maybe for outdoor dining, or even lanes of streets, or what have you, we're encouraging cities to experiment with these outdoor spaces. We'll probably have, unfortunately, we have an opportunity to continue to do that in the spring, because we're not quite out of the woods on the pandemic. So if there are some ways to experiment with public space, and then keep what sticks moving forward, we think that'll be really important. Some other accelerated trends to be aware of. Concern about transit. The transit ridership throughout the country was declining prior to the pandemic. The big issue there, we think, is more a technology issue and how transit integrates with other modes of mobility. So I remember when we were working on the downtown plan, you guys were pioneers in the driverless technology. You had that shuttle going around downtown. Those new technologies will factor into transit moving forward. And then how transit integrates with choice, how it integrates on a phone, whether you're looking for an Uber, a bike, or a bus. It all really needs to be integrated in one place. Public health, certainly going to be a much bigger consideration as we design both public and private space moving forward. And then higher education. Four-year colleges, we're looking at an era of more challenges in enrollment prior to the pandemic. This has accentuated it moving forward. University of Nebraska as a public school is probably a little more insulated from this than private colleges moving forward. But there's going to be increasing competition for four-year college experiences, and also more opportunity for alternatives such as community college, two-year vocational school, coding school, those types of things. So our last bundle of trends, which we labeled as disruptive trends. And the first one I'll talk about social equity. And I mentioned in the intro that this was a trend already in place before the pandemic. But certainly the protests over the summer and the national awakening, if you will, or reawakening, has accelerated this trend to a great degree, particularly with younger generations. So we see the tide of activism expanding, not only focusing on racial justice, but also expanding to other realms. So we would expect stronger activism in terms of education, wages, housing opportunity. Folks need to be aware that we think we're getting into a different political environment moving forward. And downtowns and business communities have an opportunity to be at the table in working with local governments, working with local leaders to help figure out solutions to some of these pressing issues. So whether it's affordable housing or it's workforce training, there's a role for the downtown and the business community to be part of that dialogue and part of the solutions moving forward. Climate change. This was reintroduced in our 2020 report. And again, we think the pandemic is going to accelerate activism targeted to climate change. So the pandemic gave folks a glimpse of a reduced carbon world. The picture on your slide there on your screen, that's New Delhi, India. And the image on the right is what New Delhi, India has looked like. They have some of the worst air on the planet. But lo and behold, particularly back in the spring, when everything shut down, they had blue sky. And I think a lot of us here in Colorado, some of the crispest, clearest days that I can recall. I'm from here, grew up here. And some of the crispest, clearest days were back in the spring when things shut down. So not that we want to shut everything down, but I think it opened our eyes to what we could achieve if we really got serious about climate change. Someone has a fire alarm or something going on there. Or maybe that's the alarm of climate change that we're hearing through the screen. In any event, we see activism growing in this area, and every community needs to be aware of that moving forward. And then lastly, and this is a tricky one, but we've been talking about the divisiveness in our politics and these global trends reports for years. And our message here was that cities and regions really need to act aggressively to invest in themselves, not to rely on the federal government. And that's still the case. We're not necessarily changing that. But we were speculating that the pandemic might be accelerating a political realignment in this country. And what a realignment is, it's a generational shift between different philosophies, governing philosophies. In the United States, those philosophies sort of veer back and forth between focus on individual prosperity and the greater good. And a good example of greater good was Franklin Roosevelt, the New Deal. Ronald Reagan, probably a good illustration of more of a focus on individual prosperity. So we were speculating prior to the November election that we may see a realignment. Didn't necessarily pan out in the election, but in the shenanigans post-election, that may actually move us back into that realm of realignment. This is still an unknown. And our message remains: the federal government's going to remain dysfunctional. It's just going to remain dysfunctional into the future. So cities, regions really need to reinvest in themselves moving forward. So last couple slides here. Our conclusions later this year after COVID, imagine when we can say that, hopefully second half of the year. This will start to be more in the rear view mirror. We think the trends will remain favorable for vibrant downtowns, that if anything, COVID has accelerated the trends that we talked about with you back in 2018 and that we've been tracking in our report. We do think that downtowns will continue to capture younger demographics. Second-tier cities have a strong opportunity, particularly in the short term, next 18 months, 3 years, there may be an opportunity there to really capture some of the migration out of some of the larger cities. In the recovery phase, an opportunity to diversify storefront economy within downtown and helping this surge of entrepreneurship that we're anticipating, helping to direct that to downtown. Any of these public space innovations, see if there's an opportunity to make some of these permanent. I've mentioned the importance of local and regional investment. And then, of course, economic opportunity and racial justice are going to be key core values moving forward. And all downtowns, we feel, need to employ these core values to be competitive and to be relevant in this changing world of ours. So I know in a moment, we're going to also talk about the impact of these trends on the 2018 plan. I would say that there's probably near-term and long-term implications from the pandemic. Long-term implications are less profound on the downtown plan, and those recommendations still hold. And remember, the downtown plan was a vision for 5, 10 years and beyond. So if anything, it maybe has accelerated the importance of those recommendations and some of those project opportunities. In the near term, we are recommending a focus of organizations like DLA on fundamentals, if you will, in the near term over the next 6, 12, 18 months as we go through recovery. So those fundamentals, clean and safe, just critical to stabilizing the downtown environment. And we know in most cities, and I assume in Lincoln, that ambassador teams and cleaning teams have been of enormous value during this time that has been challenging in many downtowns. Also in the near term, storefront economy. You know, what can we do to support existing retail, existing restaurants, and then how can we also get ready for this surge of entrepreneurship that could be directed to downtown storefronts moving forward. And then also public space. Are there some things we've done in public space, reuse of public space that we want to make permanent moving forward? So with that, I will wind down the presentation. You can obtain these reports from our website. We did a pandemic update report back in July, which we think is still holding true at this point. We also tweet about this stuff, so our Twitter handle's on there as well. But at this point, I think I will hand it back to Todd.
Great. Thank you, Brad. And we've got a couple of questions coming in now, so feel free to keep typing them, and that'll prompt me to call on you. Before we get into Q&A, though, I wanted to give a quick update specifically to our master plan. So I'm going to share my screen right here, mainly to go over the Catalyst projects really quick and what we've been up to since that late 2018 plan was released. And luckily, I think things have been moving. This is good. A lot of these Catalyst projects have been well underway. So creating the community commons, obviously primarily that focus was on what to do with purging. So as most of you know, and as an update to Brad and JJ, the purging development did choose a developer here about a little less than a year ago, which was an exciting proposal, and we're going to follow that as it goes along, which has kind of fit within the purview of what the master plan called for, type one of what should go at purging, with having the community space on the west side and affordable housing and office space on the east side. So that's a promising project by our Omaha developer. Enhancing the front door to downtown. That's number one. As we see the entryway, O Street is the primary front door to downtown, and the city did develop a TIF district where the increased increment values will help support that entryway. So the entryway corridor, all up from 9th Street all the way to 28th, actually, will focus on this major entryway to downtown. So we're excited to see some of those projects come through as the increment comes along here for the next 10 to 15 years. The greenways, the city, over a year ago now, conducted with, I believe Jennifer Seacrest might be on this call, and Olson Associates, or now Olson, to look at our greenways in 14th and 11th and put together a plan. So that planning was in place and kind of looking through the next steps of that. Also part of that was look at the one-way, two-way conversion. Our board of directors last month got a presentation from LTU, Lincoln Transportation Utilities, and they are currently doing a study to see the prospect for phase one of one-way to two-way, which would be 13th Street, quickly followed by the other numbered streets, 11th, 12th, and 14th. So that's well underway to examine moving and change two-way for some of these street concepts that was pointed out in the master plan. The music district. There was some good momentum before COVID, and we've recently got back together again with that music district executive committee to talk about what our priorities are going to be, especially with the O Street TIF coming in, and how we can bring energy to the core and identity to the core of downtown as we come forward. Obviously, the entertainment district and the experiential economy has taken a big hit in the near term, and we're hoping we can bounce back strong and give people reason to want to come to our downtown right-of-way and our public space and have these activities and figure out how to do that moving forward. So we're well underway with working on that. Number 5, creating the signature urban park. There was a study and work with the group from the Woolen Company to go toward that West Park and development moving forward. And that shows positive signs. So, and then also completing other projects with the 05 master plan is we've seen some of that, which primarily looks at residential. And I'll kind of close up really quickly here with, Brad did talk about the growth in the residential sector, and that was a really key to our center of opportunity in Lincoln, and our opportunity certainly is residential. So really quickly, as you can see, our report shows in 2010 we had about 1.2 thousand residents in the area, and about 6.4 thousand downtown residents after what's completed and proposed for downtown residential. These numbers don't include the newest Gold's building announcement, but other than that, should be pretty up to date. So we're seeing a continued growth in a bunch of different uses in residential units. Certainly since the master plan, there was a big focus on more than just student housing, and all of the new announcements since then have been anything but student housing. So that's good to see that kind of diversity when it comes to mixed use types of housing. So we've seen a lot of this happen, and I'm glad Brad came to talk today too, to see, okay, what does this mean for the plan moving forward? And it's good to know that the acceleration is something we really want to look at. And with that, I think there's some other kind of concepts. And I had a couple hoteliers who couldn't make the call today that certainly wanted me to ask the question. And thankfully, actually, Leslie, who I'll open it up to you here to ask the first question, Leslie, if that's okay. But you know, talk about what the prospects may be and what you see with the trends for business travel and conventions, and the need for more convention space to get these people back, and when that might be. So Leslie, if you have any other questions, if you want to kind of ask specifically your question, feel free to do that now.
No. Okay. Hey, thanks, Todd. Yeah, I was just curious what the trends are showing as far as the return to large groups of people, conventions at the hotels, business travelers coming into our city. You know, we rely on providing opportunities for them when they walk past our shop. We really miss those folks. And when do you see those returning to, or what? How will it maybe change? How will we see different things regarding travelers to our city for performances and for business?
And Leslie, Francie and Finch bookstore here in Lincoln, for those of you who don't know. So wonderful bookstore here in downtown.
Thanks, John.
Really good question, and not just Lincoln. You know, most downtowns have a real strong niche in hospitality, conventions. Denver has been hit particularly hard in their downtown because of that reliance. Most of what we've heard is conventions don't think that they're back to pre-pandemic levels till about 2023, and 2022 should be a strong recovery year for that niche. There's less confidence that that's going to happen later this year, with the exception of all these family gatherings. There's so much pent-up demand in the economy right now, or gathering for a variety of reasons. So what we're expecting is you're going to see first sort of the floodgates open on weddings and family reunions and some of these smaller gatherings that actually do drive a lot of hotel stays. And my recollection is they were pretty impactful in Lincoln. So that's likely what you're going to see come back first, that niche, latter half of this year. But 22, 23 is what most folks think is when that's coming back. And then long-term impact, I just think I think we're going to be back to quote unquote normal sooner than later, once we're all confident with the vaccine and all of that. I know going back 100 years is dangerous, but you know, the Roaring 20s followed the pandemic of 1918, which was the last episode of this, and that was fueled a lot by pent-up demand of people just wanting to gather and to do stuff. So we remain pretty optimistic on that.
Excellent. Thanks, Brad. Hallie Salem with Urban Development has a question. Feel free to go ahead and ask now, Hallie.
Well, I think, you know, just in some of these conversations we've had with chamber talks and other things, there seems to be some of the things that we were saying all along with needing more outdoor space and parks and walkable streets. There seems to be this sort of recognition that has extended beyond the normal people, planners and city folk talking about it, to now extending to retailers and other people talking about needing walkable streets. And I'm wondering, as we return to normal, is there a way to keep that momentum going?
Yeah, it's a great question. And Haley, it's great to see you, or see your image. And JJ Folsom, be on alert, because I'm going to want you to address this one too. this is a silver lining of this thing. It's really been a time of experimentation with outdoor space, and actually Colorado's been a national leader for this. So we've been witnessing innovations throughout our state, both in the resort mountain communities, downtown Denver, other places. So a lot of activations have involved more aggressive use of sidewalks by restaurants and businesses, the whole parklet thing, street closures, partial street closures. Boy, my recollection in Lincoln is you got some wide streets. You got a lot of real estate that's on your public rights of way. And I know you are, and this is a great thing to hear. You're proceeding cautiously, but you're proceeding with some two-way conversion. I believe 13th was the street that you're starting that with. So I think Haley, to answer your question, I think just being conscious of opportunities, but there are tons of models that have popped up all over the country. And I mean, JJ, anything you would add in terms of things you've been involved with or seen?
Not really. Just I agree with what Brad said. Hi, everybody. Nice to see so many familiar faces again. We, as Brad mentioned, Colorado's really become a leader in this, even given our weather, until recently, when we've had sub-zero temperatures, but, our weather, like yours, fluctuates in the wintertime, and we've seen very creative methods of utilizing parking spaces in front of businesses and converting those into outdoor seating, using heaters, putting up igloos and tents, and a variety of different structures. Alley improvements, that was one of the things we talked about a lot in your downtown plan in Lincoln. We're seeing a lot more cities, Denver, we're working on a project in Flagstaff, Arizona, where businesses are using alleys for outdoor seating, while still maintaining them for utility services and trash pickup. So I think this is a trend that's going to stick. We're seeing many of our temporary conversions in Denver. There's demand from residents that live on those streets or near those streets saying, hey, this has been really great. Can we do some version of a shared street permanently? So that's one of the positives that we're seeing from COVID.
I would just quickly add, and JJ, I'm glad you reminded me of alleys, because particularly in the music district that entertainment district in downtown Lincoln, that there's a couple alleys there. It's just prime for greater utilization, and maybe this is a springboard where we can be a little more bold and just do it.
That is a great segue into our next question. Clay Smith with Speedway, and then if Rich Clausen with Olson has anything he wants to add, I think there is some time for creative ideas. So Clay, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Thank you, Brad. Thanks for being back on. My question really, I think, has been answered, because it was really trying to figure out best practices that other downtowns
Yeah, let me add, there's also an economic side to that too. And because while, particularly restaurants have really struggled through this thing. And even if they can use sidewalks, that doesn't necessarily bring them to what they need. So we've seen some interesting partnerships between office properties, tenants, businesses, to support their retail, and even creating, I'll just give you a small example here in our own building, which is, we have a small office building in Denver. It's a 3-story historic building that we're in, and I don't know, there's maybe 10,000 square feet in this building. It's not that big. But the property owner contracted with a tenant, a bakery, to serve us all holiday treats, and it's just a way that the property owner was able to support the tenant within the building. And I think there are ways that are more substantial that tenants could be doing now, even buying credit for future food service, so that 6 months from now, when your workforce hopefully is largely returned, you've got credit that you pay for now to the extent that you can do it. So I think in addition to the public space, not to forget the economic linkages that we can create between those tenants that can afford to, particularly with those ground floor businesses that have been struggling and just need a little bit more fuel to make it through the next 2, 3, 4 months.
Excellent. Yeah, really good ideas, and yeah, it puts the onus on DLA as well to continue to figure out creative ways to activate these spaces. Kaylin Ackert with Woods Aiken, also part of the DLA Board and Project Committee. Kaylin, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Sure. Brad, welcome back. JJ, thanks for being here too. I guess my question was, if we can we create a link, or is there a link to this rise in entrepreneurship and people being more creative? Do landlords maybe need to be aware of trends going more towards creative spaces? Didn't know what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, boy, if landlords needed a readjustment, this is it. So flexible leases moving forward, not just retail, also on office. We do think there's going to be a reshuffling of your tenant base. There could be some silver lining to this, because you're going to have businesses that really want to be downtown that are going to be reshuffling into this. But more flexibility in leases, more of a nod to entrepreneurship, whether it's a ground floor that the business may need a small space to start and then may need to expand quickly as it regenerates. With the ground floor, we've already seen this across the country. One of the fascinating things to me about this whole episode is how the whole food chain, if you will, real estate food chain, adapted, and many cases where property owners or landlords were able to provide deferred rent or concessions because their lenders, provided some deferral of time and all of that. So there's been some natural play in the marketplace to help sustain people. I do think we need to understand that, again, while we may recover quickly, there's another few dark months ahead, another 3-4 months probably that are going to be challenging for folks. And then that rebound may not be automatic. And so whether it's a new business or an existing business, they're going to continue to need flexibility with their lease and with their payments, certainly through the end of the year. The last thing I'll say is we do expect a pretty strong, yet another round of stimulus. And, we can argue the merits of that long-term, but short-term, there's going to be another strong shot of stimulus, which should also help stabilize both businesses and hopefully landlords in terms of rent subsidies until we get completely through this thing.
Thanks, Brad.
Well, we have a former city councilman and front page superstar of the Journal Star fairly recently, Carl Eskridge, with a question. So Carl, take it away.
Thanks. It's great to see everybody. Slow news day in Lincoln, Nebraska back in January. So the city the mayor's office has proposed a new, aggressive new climate plan that is going before the Planning Commission and City Council, and see some of my friends from City Hall on the call today. So I just wondered how that might impact downtown Lincoln. Maybe Colin or Paul, you guys got any ideas about that?
The climate action plan is going to Planning Commission today, Carl, so you are correct. It's in process for approval. Then that recommendation will be forwarded to the City Council. I think there's really two big parts to that climate action plan, one being sustainability and the other being resiliency. With the climate action plan, we know that there's climate change happening, and that document's looking out to the year 2050, just as we are with the update of the comprehensive plan. So there are strategies embodied in that document that are meant for municipal government, but also encouraging all of our partners and community folks to get on board with, whether that be in downtown or that be anywhere else in our community. I think that relating to downtown, we always talk about infill redevelopment and, using those resources that we already have in place as a good way to develop. And we're seeing that. And I think the climate action plan would speak to that and support that a lot, in the projects that we've mentioned during this meeting. So it's aligning well. I hope to see that climate action plan does get a good recommendation today and move forward. But yes, there are a lot of good recommendations for downtown, but also across the community that will help achieve that goal.
Thanks, Paul. And Paul, this question too is kind of for you, Dallas, Hallie, and all you city steering committee people. How do you all feel? Do you have any other updates that I missed on the master plan and the momentum moving forward, and areas you think after hearing Brad's presentation that this kind of highlights that we need to put extra focus on here moving forward?
I think you hit a lot of them, Todd, in terms of some of the like 11th Street and M Street. And luckily, I think we have a lot of projects that will be along those streets, and we'll be able to capitalize on some of that private investment to make public investment and therefore spur some additional investment down the road. So, Dallas.
Yeah, I think one of the things we've really emphasized in the downtown master plan is to better utilize our street right-of-way or public spaces. And one question that I have, Brad, is traffic counts have diminished, are much lower than they were pre-pandemic. Do you see them returning to pre-pandemic levels or not, or leveling off at lower counts?
That's a really interesting question. And hey, Dallas, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Well, first of all, and we talked about this in 18 when we presented these trends, there's been a downward reliance on vehicle use, even in smaller cities, going back many, many years, and still the long-term trend shows decreased vehicle use. I think the more significant impact of the pandemic is going to be in your commuter traffic. If we're working 1 or 2 days a week from home, even 1 day a week, that's a 20% weekly reduction in commuter traffic. So we think you're going to see perhaps a decline. I wouldn't call it a steep decline, but I think a gentle decline in commuter demand, both for traffic and parking too, which has always been a hot issue in Lincoln. That long-term trends were already supporting this. I think the pandemic again accelerates it, and then there's this added kicker of accelerating flex time in the office, which could reduce some commuter demand. So yeah, whether we've peaked on traffic or not, I don't know if I'd be as bold as to say that, because Lincoln's going to continue to grow and you're going to have more people. People are still going to use cars. But certainly in the near term, midterm, there should be a reduction in traffic and parking demand. And who knows, it may indeed have peaked. That's something that we're wrestling with nationally and in other cities as well.
We have Michelle Waite with the university here, and I know you know Michelle well. I think a big question too we have often is As you talk about the newer generation, do we see a difference in post-pandemic how students interact with downtowns? Is there something we should be doing? And that was kind of the second part of my question for you all too, is are there, with these trends that have accelerated for business improvement districts, what should the priority be? Or where can we get the best bang for our buck, and what are some best practices there?
Hey, Michelle, good to see you.
Brad, good to see you.
I've been getting a hard time in Denver because back in 18, I was working there on a cold night. I ran into a store to get a cap. And of course, it was a red, University of Nebraska cap. So I continue to wear it to this day. Keeps me warm, even if it gets me into a little trouble here. I think in the downtown plan, we talked a lot about student interaction with downtown. I mean, part of that was housing. I think we did see a leveling off of the private sector supply of student housing, which I think was a good thing. And we're seeing more market rate housing. I think that music district continues to be a really critical piece of the downtown experience moving forward, in part for the question you asked, in terms of students interacting and Lincoln as a desirable location. I also think with increased competition for students, and again, I think most four-year colleges are going to be finding that. I do think you have an advantage as a public university, but there is going to be increased competition for students. The desirability of the community around the campus is going to just elevate in importance in that moving forward. So the music district is part of that for creativity, part of that for what a student would see in an experience. The whole notion of storefront economy and regenerating storefronts with a whole variety of uses, local independent retail in addition to restaurants and other avenues is going to be critically important. So we don't see that the pandemic's going to throw a wrench in how students, and again, younger demographics interact with the urban environment. In fact, it may just accelerate their desire, and in the short term, this pent-up demand to gather, we think in younger demographics is going to be pretty profound. So it's great to hear from Todd about the music district. We had to put it on hiatus for a year, but we're already organizing to sort of figuring out about how we roll this out. The last thing I'll say on this, because this is also near to me on a personal level, my youngest son is involved in the music industry in Denver. He was booking talent for a series of nightclubs. So his world evaporated in March. I mean, that world just went away. But they're already starting to gear up and starting to project ahead of what that looks like. And like anything, whether it's storefronts or anything that really got particularly hard hit in this episode, they're looking at how to make it better. How do we improve upon the plans that we had before? And I think there's an application in Lincoln to the music district. Are there some ways to actually be more aggressive moving forward? How we integrate the outdoor space with this whole experience and connect, Michelle, to your question, connect physically and programmatically to the university.
Todd, can I follow up with a question?
Certainly.
And I'm going to apologize if you hear anything. I've got a plumber downstairs working on putting in a new water heater for me at 4 degrees outside. So if you hear noise, that's what's going on. But kind of along that same line, Brad, I don't know about any of my colleagues on the call here today, but I found myself really trying to patronize our local businesses, especially our unique niche businesses. Maybe I'm the only one that did that, but how do we, Hallie kind of asked this question, the momentum, how do you keep up that momentum and that, whatever you want to call it, desire to patronize downtown, almost a loyalty versus convenience. Maybe that's a good way to say it. How do you keep that, whether it's me or whether it's our students? How should you suggest to us that we keep up that momentum?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And Michelle, to your point, in most cities, and I don't know if you saw this in Lincoln, in most cities, neighborhood business districts have outperformed downtown business districts for the very reason you just mentioned, the patronizing of the local independent businesses. And like you, I know my wife and I have made a concerted effort that we want to support about a dozen local restaurants that are close to our house that we want to make sure they survive. So I think those of us that could do that have been doing that. I think to your question, and I was going through, Todd, I was going through the plan again, and there were some promotional recommendations and things that DLA has done in the past. So the whole shop local promotion, real opportunity here to really double down on that and to direct that at adjacent neighborhoods, not just university students. People who are in walking, biking distance of downtown, or really any resident of Lincoln. So I think shop local promotions, shop the blocks, which you've had real success with in the past. So sort of doubling down on these retail promotions and marketing that are oriented. And there could be a real collaborative opportunity, Michelle, between the university and DLA. I think there's been hesitation in the past to allow the university to be sort of a promotional platform, you know, for marketing downtown to the students, and maybe we put that aside here for a year or two, in acknowledgement that you need each other in a way that maybe you haven't in the past, particularly through recovery. You can get stingy about it later, but in recovery, maybe there's a new opportunity for capitalizing on those direct promotional lines back and forth.
Yeah, that's a great segue, because we're starting to utilize the university, especially with our Johnny Carson School of Emerging Media Arts. And I know Richard McGinnis and Rich Clausen have been working on a project that we're starting to get more involved with as it relates to music district as well. So Rich, do you want to kind of give an update there?
Yeah, just real quick. We engaged with Megan Elliott, Ash Smith, and Jason Griffiths from the Carson School for Emerging Media Arts, and as well as some downtown business owners and just others in the community. Richard and I have kind of been on this for almost a year now. And we're starting to, we started with the idea of what could we do to create a city and a part of our city that created things for engagement, for experiencing, whether it's the arts or music or just cool things for the next generation to acknowledge, I think, Lincoln as being a great place to begin their career, to make a life, et cetera, et cetera. We did it with the underlying desire to create something that is so cool and popular that if it was to be taken away, it would make people upset. And the engagement that we've had with the university, specifically with Megan, Ash, and Jason, has just been fantastic. And these are student created ideas and concepts that are starting to come to fruition. And we're going to take some of these and working with some local business people, but we're going to take them public. This is really cool stuff, probably within the next 2 to 3 months. But we're going to be asking for everybody to pitch in ideas, give support and advocacy for this kind of nebulous thing that I've just tried to describe. But Richard, anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think you covered it, Rich. Like you said, it's something that will be, you know, different, exciting. And that's the whole idea, is that, like you said, you know, we started off with wanting to do laser shows and lighting. So it's kind of morphed into a lot more than that, but we'll see how it ends up.
Thank you. Yeah, Rich and Richard, it's been fun hearing what you guys have prompted with these students, and I've had the privilege of now meeting with a lot of them, and Professor Griffiths, and they're giving us a lot of ideas. And we have a history of working with these departments, whether it be the College of Journalism and now the College of Architecture and the Emerging Arts, utilizing the future of Lincoln has certainly been wonderful. So appreciate all the work you've done for that to really get this ball rolling and moving forward with these ideas. And I think that's a great way to close this. And this was also Hallie's other question too. You know, with the development of the accelerators, ideas that maybe have seemed out there, is this a time now to push that quicker? And are there any specific examples of that where, okay, that might have seemed too much before, but now placemaking is more important than ever? How do we bring that sense of place, and what are we doing? Just say yes too. Yeah, that is important. Everything DLA does is important, and yeah, that's wonderful as well. But yeah, it's really, we do see this as an accelerator. So you want to kind of close with that, Brad?
Yeah, I think collaborative creative space is going to come back in a big way. So, you know, the co-working elements of that in your music district and how you're going to foster creativity of their retail, you know, having several concepts, sharing a space as opposed to a unique tenant. There are going to be a whole variety of things. The whole maker phenomenon will continue, and that will come back. So I'll just close. It's interesting to me because I talked about the migration to secondary markets, and again, where we're seeing that in Colorado are some of our resort markets, places like Breckenridge or Aspen, places like that, where people have second homes, and now it's a primary home. And we'll see how many winters they endure before they make that a permanent choice. But the point is we've seen already, even with the pandemic still raging a few months ago, we saw an increase in co-working and in collaborative spaces because of people just having more flexibility and working not only farther from home, but in other cities. So I think that's an option. That's a trend that's going to be accelerated moving forward. And just another way to think through your spatial dimensions, whether it's a private retail or office space or even a public space moving forward, that these shared concepts we think are going to be back in a big way.
Appreciate it, Brad. Thank you to Brad and JJ for joining us today. This has been wonderful to, you know, especially catch up after we worked so intensely with the master plan and to see everything going on. So certainly our staff feels the acceleration of a lot of these trends, and we're up to the task to help continue to try to do this, especially with the help of all you that are on here today. We appreciate the excitement and energy. So glad that something positive can come out of this too. You know, it has been a tough year for a lot, and we're going to continue to find ways to accelerate the passion back into downtown and gathering and things like that. So thanks again for coming, everybody. We will have this recorded and placed on our workshop page as we talk about placemaking and accelerating ideas. Certainly continue to shop where your heart is. That's our most recent shopping promotion. And you can take some selfies and get back a really cool booklet for a date night. We have our virtual winter market next week as well. All this is on our webpage, downtownlincoln.org, to get caught up with all this. So continue to support our wonderful, unique, and local businesses and hotels and all those places that need our help with this. And again, appreciate everything you brought with us today, Brad and JJ, and have a wonderful and as warm as possible afternoon, everybody.
Thanks, Lincoln. Always a pleasure to see you guys. We'll talk soon.
See you all again. Have a good day.